Hello, fellow conscious agents reading and participating with Reality Sandwich. Kyle here back with another great Share Your Experience. Today I'm going to be joined by Alan. Thank you for logging on this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Of course, for our audience, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief introduction to who you are and your current ethos, business, mission in the plant medicine space.
Absolutely. So, my name is Alan Wiederhold. I am a 12-year Navy veteran. I am a childhood sexual trauma survivor. I'm a psychedelic assisted facilitator as well. I owned and was part of an insurance company for about 30 years. And it was kind of funny. I heard a statistic, I think a couple weeks ago, 71% of people who do plant medicine end up like moving careers or leaving the things that they started, which is kind of what happened to me. So when I went through my first plant medicine experience, 3.5 hours, healed so much of my childhood trauma that I needed to go do something else. So what do? You go learn how to help other people. And in the process, I created a new hydration supplement that promotes brain health. And we've seen a lot of promise with psychedelic assisted therapy.
Beautiful. This is the Share Your Experience show. So I'd love for you, let's dive into that first
Sure.
psychedelic or plant medicine experience that you feel called to share.
Absolutely.
Were you smoking cannabis in high school? What was your first introduction to these plant medicines?
What's really funny is that I had none. I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. Everything that I joke, if you lived in the 70s and the 80s and you lived in a Christian, like charismatic Pentecostal Christian home, everything was a sin. The music I listened to had backward masking. We weren't allowed to really do anything. Drugs were bad. I mean, I had always heard that my entire life. So being that I grew up in the no drugs with the religion, and then in the military, zero tolerance for drugs, I had no prior history. And 4 years ago, burning my life to the ground, I was unhappy. I was suicidal. I had everything that life could possibly offer, but I would lay in bed thinking of ways to kill myself. And my wife of 22 years at the time had said, "You know what? I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. You need to figure this out because you're not in love with yourself." And during that time, I had a lot of friends that were going through psychedelic assisted therapy, and they were going to these retreats and having this incredible experience. And I laughed because I resisted all of it. I said, "No way on earth am I doing this. These are drugs. There's no way." Then my doctor actually said to me, we were having breakfast. He's like, "Bro, I give you drugs from a lab where I have no idea where they come from. And we're talking about stuff from the earth that God created." And he's like, "I think you need to rethink that." So I walked away and I was like, maybe he's onto something. Maybe I don't have all the answers that I thought I had. And that was a decision for me. So before I knew it, was in a preparation call. I went to a retreat that was MDMA, and 3.5 hours. It was incredible.
Could you walk me through a little bit about the retreat? Who was this friend that introduced it to you? Were there any hesitations, and what were your prior conceptions
Yeah.
behind using MDMA to the experience that you
I
had?
didn't even know what it was. Like, so I mean, now that I'm in the industry, clearly have the idea of ecstasy and where it was in the 70s and 80s. I had no frame. I had no idea. I didn't even know what it was we were taking. It was a retreat that, truthfully, it's very hard to find. I actually was in am in a mastermind of business owners, and this was key to their not only transformations of their lives but their businesses. So it was a lot of friends, and my coach and mentor was the one who actually first was the one who had gone and came back and was like, "Greatest experience of my life, everyone needs to do this," and I was the last holdout.
Oh wow. So yeah, walk me through the,
Yeah.
again, that not as popular as it is now, I'd say. What was this retreat like, and what was the ceremony like, and
Yeah.
walk me through that
So
experience.
very, very ceremonial. So you have an integration person that you're working with. So for 4 weeks up to the lead up of the actual ceremony, we did weekly calls. That was very difficult for me because being a business owner and being somebody who's resistant to all of this stuff, I was not broken. It was the entire world. Forget the fact that I don't want to live anymore, but it couldn't possibly me. But then you start unraveling these things in these conversations with these people, and you get off the phone and you're like, oh my God, like you end up crying. So there's this 4 week preparation phase. We end up going to the retreat itself. There's a bunch of different people who are there. There's probably, I want to say, maybe 8 people who are there, don't know each other. And we go into a kind of a ceremonial room, and we all go around the room and we talk about what it is we want to get out of it. Well, at this point, I'm 4 weeks in. I've already confessed to my wife and the world that I was sexually abused as a child. It was something that I'd never done before. I told her just prior to this what it all had happened. So now I'm learning to just let go of everything. And I'm going around the room and I'm still like, kind of, this is a little weird. So I just tried to embrace it. And then the next morning, you get ready to go into your actual experience.
Beautiful. I think a lot of misconceptions with using medicines and ceremony like this and other plant medicines is this isn't going to magically heal you. You need the integration in the post
Yeah.
ceremony period.
So, and
So,
I always say that to everyone that the medicine is a tool. That is all it is. The work is done by you. And that's where I think the beauty of the integration comes in.
yeah, could you walk me through your integration period and post, yeah, that experience?
So the morning of the actual plant medicine, we go in. There's some smudging that's involved. So there is some conversations again about what it is that you're trying to get out of the journey itself. And that's the beautiful thing about medicine is you get what you need, not necessarily what you want. And again, I had really no conceptions or no frame. I did a lot of research. I read a lot. I big fan of Michael Pollan. I watched a documentary. I read a lot of books, academic that way, but nothing prepared me for what actually had happened. So I fell very hard onto an Aztec temple. I looked over this lush green river and trees, and everything was just absolutely incredible. I'm half Hispanic, so that was kind of an interesting thought. It was very visual for me. I relived my sexual abuse 3 times. I felt the tap on my shoulder. I relived it on my grandparents' steps where it happened. I was in the room. I could smell it, see it, feel it. The third time I was actually there, though, he was sitting on the bed crying and he was apologizing to me, and I was in power. And I was able to forgive him, and he was able to tell me that it was actually done to him. So then I saw another fight with my mom and dad. I was 4 years old. I remember where I was on the bed, never remembered, never saw, never, like to this day, like it was insane that I'd seen it. My dad had bounced a check. My mom had just like destroyed him. He came into my room crying. So that really was the foundation of everything I ever thought about money. Like success and everything was, I didn't want that to happen. I was 4. And I asked him, why did you put this on me? So I relived all of these events when I was in this 3.5. It was 10 years of therapy. But the biggest one for me was my wife and I. Now, my wife was in the other room in her own ceremony, and she showed up in my experience. And she kept showing up. And when she would say my name in the other room, I would hear it. And I was almost as if she was guiding me through. And there was a point toward the end where I had an out of body and I'm looking down at myself, and my wife is actually covering me with my hands and my feet, and she's protecting me from me. For 22 years of our marriage, she had protected me from myself. She took all my darkness. She took all my pain. And when we came back together, it was just like I met her for the first time, free of ego, free of misconceptions, free of soul. It was just absolutely incredible. So then you have all of this healing, and then you don't know what to do with this. Like, so it's the first time you haven't let go. So I get home, I'm driving down the road. It's 2 weeks later, and I hear a voice in my head saying, you know what you need to do. Well, I know what that is. Like, I needed to call my abuser and actually find and forgive him. I had no idea where he was in 48 years. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then I hear the voice like, you have to do this. So I ended up calling my abuser. I found him. 48 years later, and I forgave him. And I got off the phone and I thought, I can pretty much do anything after this. So it's been an amazing couple of years since that first journey.
Yeah, Alan, that's really transformative. That's, wonderful to hear. Again, the power that these medicines can provide. Again, you sound like you were tapped out pre this experience. How'd that affect your business life, your relationship with your wife and your family? What was the post integration and next few years looking like? Did you go back for more ceremony? How has it really impacted your professional and personal life?
Yeah. So for me, like I said before, I think 71% of people who have transformative experiences can never go back to the life they had. And that was definitely me. There were parts of my business that showed up. The business that I had created was a version of an old version of me. And it's really hard to tie the two together when there's this new version of who you are. And it was difficult. It was difficult for a while. My marriage, I saw things in my experience where my wife and I were dancing in we built a brand new home. It was her dream home that I had done while we were actually going through this whole experience. And it was a house that became a home. And the way that my integration worked, and I thought it was really cool, is that we actually recorded my transcripts of my journey. And then you go back through, and not only do I get to hear them all the time, because I still listen to my transcripts, but I had to type them out. So when I'm meeting with my facilitator, I'm actually going through every period, everything. And then we would actually make note cards of the things that jumped out at us that were common themes. And I would carry those around between sessions. And I would look at those. So I had a Rachel card, and I had a house that became a home, and I had a business. So there were things that I knew that I needed to work on. And that went on. So we had 12 weeks of integration after that, where every month we had new cards, and it was super cool. But the problem with that is, like I said before, you have this healing. You don't know what to do with it because you've never really lived in peace. So I struggled with that. So I decided that I was going to go and learn everything there was to know about this. I was going to go and get some certifications and do a couple of 100 hours and work with some people. And then I was going to do it all on my own. So I did. I created my own setting. I created my own preparation. I created a whole journal of what I wanted to get out of it. And then I did my own psilocybin journey. So I spent 3.5 hours on my own. Had planned it when my kids and my wife were all off and doing their thing. And it was incredibly magical. I got to go back and look at things from the first journey. It was almost like they had kind of piggybacked. There was a point in my journey where I was on a dirt road. It was the same dirt road that I could get into all of this 3.5 hours of my first experience. But there was a part where I actually found my heart, and I picked it up, and it blossomed into like this beautiful green clover. And I actually said in my first experience, "There's my heart. I haven't seen you in a very long time." Well, now I'm on the same dirt road, and I keep looking back. And I'm looking back at the bags that I left back there, all of the trauma and the pain. And the voice says to me, and God says to me, "Why do you keep looking back? You left them. It's time to move forward." And that's where I decided at that point that it was time to create something new, which is kind of how we created this new business.
Now that you've experienced both psilocybin and MDMA, and you've gone through your own training and regimen you want to create, do you recommend the MDMA first for people you chat to, or psilocybin, or do you take it on a case by case basis?
I think it's really on a case by case. So, point of reference, I've tried everything since then. DMT is my 100% favorite. There is nothing that would prepare you for that. Where I'm at in my life now, it's kind of funny because this is part of my life now, and I have facilitated other businessmen and worked with first responders and people with trauma. Definitely. Each one is specific. I would have a conversation with where people are and where they would respond to what. I think that MDMA is a much kinder, gentler for trauma and for complex PTSD. Psilocybin, some of my experiences have been very, very opening, but rough. I mean, they've been rougher. But again, I mean, I tell friends, "Oh my God, I died last Friday from a DMT experience. It was amazing." And people are like, "Wait a minute, what?" So I really do think it's up to the person and the facilitator they're working with.
Well put. My next question, you've started this new business, and these plant medicines are crafting a whole, I don't like to use the word industry per se, but let's say community, mycelium network. There's a whole new way of thinking that are coming from these plant medicines. And I'm curious, your opinion on balancing that with, there is the respect to the indigenous people and perhaps some sort of anti-capitalistic movements, wanting to creep into this space. How do we balance that? I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've raised money for companies. I'm right there, stuck in the capitalist system as well.
And I'm with you. And I again created an insurance company and had been in that business for 30 years. And I agree. There is a way to make money, but there is a way to also be dishonest. I was at PsyCon this week, and it was really an interesting eye-opening experience, because you do have a lot of the old, what I would call, and this is no disrespect, the old hippie movement kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have kind of the new, we're looking at the same experiences. We want the same enlightenment, but we want it in a different way. Now, what's really bizarre about that, again, I kind of said in the beginning, I'm Hispanic. My grandparents came from Mexico. My DMT experience was really about reclamation back to the earth. Like, everything that I'm going to create is to really do respect to indigenous. So it was a beautiful thing for me, because I have to balance that. So a lot of what I'm trying to create, because I do believe in capitalism, but I think that capitalism at its purest form is an exchange of value. It's not an exchange of money; it's an exchange of value, because money itself has no real meaning. There's no value to money. It's whatever we place value on. So I believe that there are ways to be able to create organizations and companies to be able to do the right thing without trying to, how do I say it, rip off the entire industry or the people who need it the most. So a lot of what we are creating with Numa is that part of what I want to do is I want to be able to give back a percentage of my revenue back to veterans organizations for plant medicine. So I'm very involved with some really amazing veterans organizations. I'm also wanted to looking at sexual survivors, because obviously that's something near and dear to my heart. So being able to take a percentage of those revenues to be able to give back into the people who need it the most
Mm-hmm.
is really where I think that balance has to be.
Excellent. So what is Numa? How did your experiences shape the creation of this company and mission, and where are you at today?
So one of the things that I had noticed from my very first experience, and I think it goes back even earlier. I was an ultra runner, so I tried to figure out how to feel. So I would run 100 milers for fun, and then you have this exhaustion, and I always ended up in the medical tent with an IV in my arm because I was dehydrated. And then I started to see the same thing. So after my very first experience, I have this incredible experience, and then I feel like garbage. And they're like, okay, let's go to the medical tent. And I'm kind of laughing because it's the same IV in my arm, and we get all of these nutritional nutrients, is what I like to joke and call them, to feel better. But then as I started to continue down my own journey of plant medicine and facilitating a lot of the people that I had, it was the same thing. It was that same serotonin dopamine crash. And then bam, like, you're exhausted. See it a lot with ketamine. So I started to look at that, and I started to question, is there something there? Is there something that I could create? And I actually went to a lab in DC. They do a lot of genetic work with PTSD and the Air Force Warfighter Health Initiative. So I sat down with these guys and I said, is there something that I could create? It was a friend that I've known, and we went back and we looked at the science, and we're like, yeah, there is. So while I initially created this for psychedelic-assisted therapy, what we found is that it's an everyday brain health supplement. So if you think about the electrolyte replacements that are out there, they're really great for ultra marathons. They're really great for people who are in fitness. Most people aren't. So that stuff never gets to the brain. So when you're talking about just daily life of brain fog and exhaustion, and then trying to create these new neural pathways and these new neurotransmitters, I created it for that. So it has been phenomenal for people in psychedelic assisted therapy. The effects that you feel, very minimal after you're on a protocol of Numa Hydrate. And Numa itself actually means soul. So this is like soul hydrate. So when we looked at this thing, and my wife actually came up with the name in a meditation, she's like, I think I got the name, and we looked and it was available, and that's really kind of how we created it. So we started with ketamine clinics. We started to see a lot of really promising success there, and then we're really kind of branching out. So this was an idea that I literally had in March, and we are already in the market.
Beautiful. That's an awesome execution there. What has been, you mentioned you just were at SciCon. How important are these community gatherings for the psychedelic movement and the education of products and services like this?
I think it's so important right now because it's so early in our industry. Again, I think the eye-opening experience for me was there's very much this old hippie way of thinking, and then you're kind of merging this new way of science per se, and all of the things in between. And you have to be able to, exactly like you said, respect the indigenous ceremonial while also looking at the future of clinical. How do you combine Western thought process with enlightenment? It is one of the craziest things in the US. We are so focused on having and doing that we spend very little time on being. So I think these things are so important because they do give you the opportunity to not only see who's doing what, but to be able to get some ideas and to make things better. I had some really good conversations with some branding folks, and you kind of hear, the messaging. Again, I started off with psychedelic-assisted therapy. It's an everyday brain health supplement you can drink every day. I drink it every morning. Like, it's like the first thing I do is I take a scoop and I go work out. So it's just, so again, you kind of think differently when you talk to other people in the industry.
Beautiful. Alan, where can people get Numa? Where can people follow you, and what's exciting you coming up in your world?
So I wrote a book called Walking in the Garden, Discovering God Through Psychedelics. It was really my first 2 years of plant medicine and my experience and facilitation. And I'm everywhere. So I was at PsyCon. I'm going to be at Remind. I'm presenting on psychedelics at the Zenith Health Expo in DC. Numa.health is our website. So www.numa.health. I'm on Instagram, Numa Health. So we're really just getting started, and I'm just super excited about this industry and just passionate about making a difference for people.
Beautiful. Alan, thank you for sharing today.
My pleasure.